Good evening, everybody. It's Monday night. It is conclusion of day 19 of the Lindsay Clancy trial. And I'm going to be recapping days 18 and 19. I haven't streamed since Thursday night. And, well, there's a lot that's going on in the 2 days that I've been gone. But I'll tell you what, I have a feeling that, I have a feeling where I think we're headed with this case. At this point, we've seen, was it 5 or 6 different medical evaluators, 5 or 6 different ones. And every single one of them has a different diagnosis for Lindsay Clancy. What?
Mike.
Oh, I'm on the wrong mic? Well, let me fix that. I sure am. I don't know why it always does it every single time. How's that? That should be better. I can't tell. Yeah, I think that should be fine. Yeah, every single one of the medical evaluators has a different diagnosis for Lindsay Clancy at this point. There was the infamous Dr. Mack that today, I don't know, people certainly have thoughts about him. There was a motion for a mistrial. I don't think that Reddington ever seriously considered that motion was going to be granted, but what he's certainly done is set the stage for appeal. Now, the judge is put in a tough spot, and because of that, he is rightfully pissed off about this case. He's pissed off at the Commonwealth, to a degree. He's certainly pissed off at the witnesses, although, how are they supposed to know? The guy starts talking about her Catholic background and her Catholic faith and trying to tie that to why she had the ability to decipher between right and wrong. You can't do that in a criminal trial. He's not a clergyman. He's not anything. He has no religious qualifications. He's speaking out of pocket about issues that are not relevant. Is that a tribal issue? Yeah. But it depends. So this case is ripe for appeal. If this goes the way of guilty, for sure, this is going to get appealed on religious grounds, for sure. Do I agree with the judge's decision not to declare mistrial after today's motion? Yeah, because, come on, man. He's given the jury instructions that they are to disregard the religious aspects of the testimony that have come in. And, whether or not they can or they can't, every single one of them has promised this court, has promised this judge that they can be objective and fair and follow the court's instructions and admonitions. And so you kind of have to give them a chance. Now, if it comes back as a guilty verdict, is whoever the appellate attorney is going to be representing Lindsay Clancy be raising holy hell about the fact that it came up in this trial and it wasn't declared a mistrial? Yeah, of course. Of course. Do I think it matters necessarily in this trial? No. And I just think there's so many other reasons there's so many other things in this case that people are going to latch onto with respect to whether they think Lindsay is guilty or innocent. And I'm going to talk about those things coming up next.
Whatever you might be going through and wherever you might be, this is Omar Serrato with the Tilted Lawyer Podcast. I'm here to take your mind off of things. Yes, I'm an attorney. No, I'm not giving you legal advice. We're going to sit and talk like people, as these are the candid thoughts of one practicing attorney, and it's after hours. So have a seat. Feel free to have a drink and join me. Let's get started.
And we're back. So, day 18, it was a full day of testimony. It was a battle of the experts, and we started off with Dr. Philip Resnick, who was the strongest, in my opinion, the strongest of all of the expert witnesses that have testified in this trial, just by sheer force of his accolades. He was from Case Western Reserve. He got his bachelor's in 1959. He got his doctorates in 1963. He's a full-time professor there, and he is still. He founded a forensic psychiatric fellowship in 1979. He directed it for 40 years. He ran Cleveland's court psychiatric clinic for over 40 years. His filicide numbers are something like 400 to 500 cases a year in the United States, compared to, for example, Dr. Mack. I think he's had 10 in over a decade. I think that was the correct number. He has personally evaluated roughly 80 parents who have taken the lives of their children, which he agrees is he's probably the most experienced individual in the country, and if not in the world, in this particular topic. He's worked on a number of world famous cases. He worked on the Dahmer case. He was a witness for the prosecution. He worked in the Unabomber case. He was, again, a witness for the government. He worked on the Casey Anthony case. He was a defense consultant, but he said he couldn't be really helpful there. He worked on the Andrea Yates case on the defense side in both trials. He was a witness for the prosecution in the Aurora Theater shooting, the Oklahoma City bombing. He's testified on both sides, prosecution and the defense. In terms of experience, there is nobody I can't imagine in the world that is going to hold a candle to this guy. And so therefore I was trying to listen very closely to what he had to say. And he had a lot to say. Number one, he had evaluated Lindsay Clancy roughly 4 months after the incident in May of 2023, for about 3 hours at Tewksbury, plus another hour and 50 minutes he spent with her parents. He said that she had a blunted, muted effect. Nurses had informed him that she was crying daily because the prosecution wants to keep harping on the fact that, oh, she never cries, or she's never allowed to smile ever. She's never allowed to have a moment of escapism in her mind because it's evidence of her guilty conscience or whatever. He made it a point to state that I believe the other experts in this case evaluated her about 3 years after the crime. Or maybe I'm remembering that wrong. I think that's something that Dr. Mack had said directly, or was it Hailstrom? I forget. But the difference is the state's witnesses, they both evaluated, and by the way, they disagreed. They're both Commonwealth witnesses, and they disagreed on the diagnosis for Lindsay Clancy. But interestingly, every single one of the medical evaluators has said that Lindsay Clancy had some form of bipolar disorder. It was only Dr. Mack that said that she had just a major depressive episode. And so he's in disagreement with all of the other experts in this case, and necessarily disagreeing with the expert in the Commonwealth's side. So there's that. And if we're dealing in the realm of reasonable doubts, and these medical experts all seem to have a different theory about what was ailing the mind of Lindsay Clancy, it's really difficult to get to a guilty verdict if I only have to be reasonably doubtful that she was not criminally culpable because of a psychosis. That's all. I think that's where we're headed. But moving along with this, his diagnosis was that she had bipolar 2 with severe depression on January 24th. He said that she had met 7 of the 9 DSM criteria for major depression. She had earlier mild mania that was documented by other experts that have come in and testified in this case. And he basically says that not only did she was unable to conform, she was under a delusional episode where she just lost her grip on reality. And we're going to hear some of that. But before I get too far into it, I think it's more worth it just to listen to what he had to say. So let's start off with his testimony.
To see from Dr. Heilbrun, government's doctor.
Again, I'm going to play the highlights. I'm not going to go through the entire 2 days, obviously. Just similar to what I've been doing. I'm playing the highlights, not the every lights, if that's even a thing.
Dr. Psychiatric testing.
Yes, I did.
Can you tell us, for example, was one of the results on the psychiatric testing, a test that he administered for the government called the MMPI, or Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory Test?
That was a psychological test that he administered, yes.
And do you recall from reviewing the records what the results were? Was she faking, was she lying, or was she telling the truth? And
the results showed no evidence of faking.
Hold on.
Now, what's interesting about this testimony is you're going to hear doctors come in and say that And I believe he's going to say later that an auditory hallucination, an auditory command hallucination is among the easiest to fake. But he's also, I mean, you could say that, for example, to a Dr. Shaw, who I think has been in practice for less than a decade, or the one that actually was treating Lindsay Clancy, who had been in practice for less than a month when she took on Lindsay Clancy's case, one of the most complex cases that you possibly get at the very beginning of your career. This guy got his bachelor's degree in 1959. He's had a PhD since 1963. You're talking about 63 years of experience post-PhD. And so if anybody's able to distinguish between somebody malingering the easiest of all symptoms to fake and actually showing actual symptoms of the thing, I think it would be him. So in my mind, if I'm on the jury, I'm most focused on what this guy has to say. Nobody's going to know more than him. Oh, did I catch him on a sidebar? Let me see if I can speed this up. Of course. Here we go.
Okay, Doctor, I had asked you if you were aware that government's Dr. Heilbrun had administered the MMPI test and came to a conclusion as to whether or not Lindsay was telling the truth, faking, or exaggerating symptoms, and you relied on that test as a portion of your opinion. Is that right?
Yes, I did.
Can you tell the jurors what the results of that test were, to your knowledge?
The summary, the results were that Lindsay Clancy had a tendency to minimize and did not have a tendency to exaggerate what she was saying in her own symptoms.
Did it also indicate that she was not, I think the terminology is faking or lying?
By the way, folks, if I've been increasing the playback speed to 1.25, I think last show I did it to 1.5 at some points. And some of you were really annoyed at that and let me know about it. So if it's too fast, just let me know. If you want me to keep it at 1.25, which is what I would prefer just to get through some of this stuff, then great. If it's too fast, just let me know and I'll slow it back down in real time.
In her answers, but in fact was being truthful as best she could be.
Yes, although the test is a little more specific about symptoms rather than lying or not lying, but it did not suggest any evidence of faking symptoms.
Okay, and I'm sorry, that broke up. It did not suggest any evidence of what?
No evidence of faking psychiatric symptoms.
And then finally, one of the scales in that test is referred to as the K, I think from the books, the K scale or the lie scale. Is that correct?
Yes, that was not elevated.
Not elevated. Okay. Now, doctor, in your experience, do you have any particular subspecialty or interest in the concept of people that are malingering or faking in the forensic world? In other words, if it's a criminal case, if it's a workman's comp case where somebody's pretending their back hurts, things of that nature, have you focused on that as a subspecialty or interest in your career?
That has been a major interest. I've actually written 46 articles or book chapters in this area. The first was 1984, and over the course of that, of course, new research comes out. So when I write a new edition of a book chapter, it would incorporate new material. So even though the chapter may go through 5 editions in a particular book, they're up to date, and the ones which were written earlier would no longer be the best basis for forming an opinion.
Yeah, in other words, he knows about malingering. He knows the difference between faking it and not faking it. The other thing was on cross-exam, like the prosecution tried to say, so isn't it true that you teach people how to conduct themselves, expert witnesses, how to conduct themselves in depositions? Isn't it true you teach classes to experts on how to testify at trial. And yeah, all those things might be true, but like, so what's I don't get the point. It's like, so he's really experienced to the point where everybody is going to him for guidance and going to him for answers and how to testify and doing all these things. So therefore his 63 years of experience in this specific field is invalid. Like, what are you trying to do with that? I mean, they tried to take a shot at him, and at the same time they bolstered his credibility, in my opinion. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That's on cross. We'll get there.
Now, for example, when you reviewed Dr. Heilbrun's report for the government, did he refer to your articles?
He did refer to my research, yes.
And was that updated research, or was it old research that he referenced?
He referenced older research.
So can you tell us, Doctor, when you consider let me start over again. When you reviewed Lindsay's medical records, you also reviewed the psychopharmacology, in other words, the medications that Dr. Tufts and Gelada and all of these other doctors had prescribed to her during that period of time?
Yes, I did.
And have in mind your interview, the time that you spent with her directly reviewing all of the documents, all of the medical records, everything that we've talked about. And you're also aware from her, not specifically what she said to you, but you're aware of the circumstances from her recollection as to the killings that she told you. Is that correct?
Yes, as well as the journal she kept and other evidence of her thinking and symptoms as the time approached for the crime on January 24th, 2023.
Okay. And you were also aware of her access to her cell phone, doing Google searches and looking up medications during that period of October, November, December, and January. You're aware of that, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors, in your opinion, sir, with your years of experience in the issue of filicide, working for just the government on a number of cases and the defense, and your evaluation of Lindsay, can you tell this jury your opinion as to whether or not at the time of the killings that she was suffering from a disease or defect that impaired her ability to substantially appreciate and or conform her conduct to the requirements of the law?
Well, sure. Let me begin with the issue of whether she had a mental disease or a defect. Ms. Clancy had a severe depression. There is a book called the DSM, or Diagnostic Manual, prepared by the American Psychiatric Association, which lists criteria for various diseases. So in the diagnostic manual, for example, one needs to have 5 out of 9 symptoms to make a diagnosis of major depression. And Ms. Clancy, as she approached the date of the crime, actually had 7 of the 9 symptoms and was severely depressed. So that, in addition to that, she had some earlier evidence of what's called a mild mania, and that fits together in what's called bipolar 2. So in other words, it's a type of bipolar illness where there is more frank depression, severe depression, but the manic aspects are not as severe. So my final diagnosis of her was called bipolar 2 with a severe depression on January 24, 2023. And from reading the reports of all of the experts that will be testifying, no one failed to diagnose a major mental disease on the day of the crime.
Now, doctor, in the course of that diagnosis,
no one failed to diagnose a major mental disease on the day of the crime. So we've heard diagnoses across the board: bipolar 1, bipolar 2, postpartum anxiety, postpartum psychosis, and major depressive disorder. I believe those are the 5. If I'm missing one, what are you going to do? The point is, there's a bunch of different diagnoses, but every single person, save for maybe Dr. Mack, who arguably did diagnose her with some kind of a mental defect, because major depressive disorder is something, well, I mean, it's significant. It's not something you just dismiss. But everybody diagnosed her as having some form of mental defect. Now, this doctor is saying examples of mania. And he's going to talk more about the auditory hallucinations, which I'm really curious about. Some of the comments that you guys have had, there was a comment that I had made that I just don't understand. To me, this case is all about if she heard an auditory hallucination, what if you just say no? And then people like, Omar, I don't understand. I have nothing nice to say to you. It's like, I'm sorry, man. I'm trying to understand. Please forgive my ignorance. I don't know how it works. I've never heard command auditory hallucinations before. And so I don't know the effects, but certainly a lot of you have experienced things either on medication or waking up after a surgery or in the throes of postpartum yourself, where it's not so simple that you just hear something and you can just disregard it or just say no or, whatever. More interesting to me is not so much the auditory hallucinations, but there were symptoms of mania that were building, it seems like, from November to December. And the other thing is, most of these medical experts have diagnosed her with bipolar. And one thing that we learned very early on in trial, thank you, Dr. Shaw, is that if you subscribe, and it wasn't just Dr. Shaw, if you prescribe somebody who is bipolar and SSRI, it can have a negative reaction within the patient that could cause psychosis. And so it's reasonable for me, if I'm a juror, this is the score. I reasonably believe that she was bipolar. I happen to know that she was on SSRIs. I have no reason to believe that an SSRI does not possibly cause a psychosis in somebody with bipolar disorder, because all the experts have told me that they do. And now I have this doctor for 63 years telling me, oh yeah, she had bipolar too, symptoms of mania, and he's going to say a lot of other things. He basically just said that she, quite frankly, he just said she was psychotic. That's what he said. That's very powerful testimony from the most qualified expert that has set foot in the courtroom, even though he's on Zoom. By the way, he's on Zoom because he just got out of a major surgery. He was on doctor's orders not to fly. He had purchased a ticket, so the judge allowed him to testify via Zoom. That's why, and I apologize for the crackling that you hear. I can't do anything about it. That's the Zoom feed. But his 63 years of experience and his ability to decipher, and the fact that he's the answer man, the fact that everybody goes to him to figure out or learn from him how to testify, how to give expert opinions, how to be cross-examined, how to do a direct examination, how to testify in depositions. All that tells me is that the guy's been around the block and he's got a lot to say. If there's anybody that you can build a credible theory on, it's this guy. And so, apologize for the rant, but that's why I'm so interested in this testimony. He's going to carry on a bit more about this. He's going to talk about, he just did the thing about nobody failed to diagnose her with a major mental disease. In a few minutes, he's going to talk about how she's, quite frankly, psychotic. He's going to talk about how she was functioning that day. And then he's going to talk about something very interesting called the delusion of influence, where he says that she was like a puppet and someone else was pulling the strings. It's literally my demon possession theory that I've been flippantly throwing out there, just as a hypothetical or some kind of a way that I can understand. Explain to me how she had lost control of her body. Well, it's like The Exorcist, and a demon overtakes her body, and then she becomes the mechanism, the shell that is being controlled by the demon inside of her, or whatever it is. He talks about that. And so this next 5 to 6 minutes of testimony is among the most relevant and interesting, and deals with all of my direct questions that I've had for 3 weeks now. So without further ado, let's continue.
Have you considered the concept of postpartum depression and or postpartum psychosis?
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors how that? I'm sorry. Can you tell the jurors how that factors into your diagnosis and opinion?
Yes. Ms. Clancy had a history of anxiety and difficulty with each of her children. It was minor with her first child, more significant with her second child, and on the occasion of Callan's birth, things went well for the first 3 months But then Ms. Clancy became very anxious and depressed, and it took quite a toll on her. And I believe the jury has heard from various treaters, such as Dr. Tufts and Nurse Gelada and others, and her own anguish about how depressed she was, where she actually felt she couldn't function, her brain was damaged, she would never be the same. So she definitely met the definition of a major depression as well as this bipolar phenomenon. Now, with respect to the postpartum aspect, since Ms. Clancy's symptoms began within 3 months of Callan's birth, that would be considered a postpartum onset. Then, of course, she had considerable difficulty over the next 5 months, and at the time of the crime itself, on January 24, 2023, Ms. Clancy was frankly psychotic. So in that sense, she had a postpartum psychosis. It's actually not frequent to have a postpartum psychosis 8 months after a birth, but it does occasionally occur. And so what I can say is whether it is the classic postpartum psychosis or not, with the postpartum onset and frank psychosis on the day of the killing, I would label that a postpartum psychosis in the sense that it was a postpartum onset and she was clearly psychotic on that day.
And doctor, when a person is psychotic or involved in having a psychosis, in your opinion, are they able to appear normal, quote unquote, communicate with people, drive a car, things of that nature?
Well, let me say there that Ms. Clancy herself did her best to not reveal the extent of her depression. She was frank with members of her own family. Her sister, her mother, her mother-in-law were aware of how anguished and depressed she was. But with more casual friends, she tended not to show the extent of her depression. I'm not suggesting that she was, although psychosis can indeed wax and wane, for example, on the day of her crime, I'm not suggesting that she was frankly psychotic every minute. She was functioning. In fact, she said she was having a better day than other days. And she actually went out and made a snowman with the kids, visited with, took Cora to a doctor for the 5th birthday checkup, and was functioning at a level that was not frankly psychotic until she had a command hallucination while her husband, Patrick, was out doing a couple of chores.
And can you tell us, doctor, what, in your opinion, what a command hallucination is and how it fits, if you will, in a diagnosis of psychosis?
Yes. If we take, first of all, a hallucination is simply hearing a voice, and the voice can be benign or it can be more malignant. So a voice may just simply say, open the window. About 1/3 of voices are called command hallucinations. That is an instruction to do something. And the majority of those commands are benign. So it might be open the window, get a glass of water. It might be something much more ominous, such as to kill oneself or harm someone else. Those are dangerous command hallucinations. Now, in Ms. Clancy's case, she had not only a command hallucination on the day that she killed her children, she had what is known as a delusion of influence. That is, not only did she hear a command, but she felt that her body was taken over by an external force where she was in a dream state and did not have control of her own body. It was almost like she was a puppet and someone else was pulling the strings.
Yeah, hold on a second. Counsel.
All right, I'm going to fast forward to that, but he got out the key theory. According to his interactions with Lindsay, she felt like she was a puppet and somebody else was pulling the strings. They have a sidebar because they're going to talk about a limiting instruction that her statements are not bases for proof. It's just something that he's deriving his conclusions off of his expert opinions. I'm going to fast forward a few minutes here. He's going to pick up and talk about, in his opinion, she was unable to conform, and that the suicide attempt was also commanded by the auditory hallucination. He's going to talk about the 5 filicide categories, from altruistic to acutely psychotic. And then I'm going to move on to the cross, but that's where we're headed. Let me just get there. All right.
Atrocity or cruelty or specific intent to kill. Such statements are admissible only as they relate to the basis for the doctor's opinion of the defendant's mental condition. All right, and I'll go into that a little bit later. Okay? Go ahead, Mr. Rigg.
So, Doctor, to conclude, would you relate your opinion as it relates to the standard of a person being lacking criminal responsibility at the time of the commission of a crime in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts?
Well, there are 2 arms to the test for criminal responsibility. One has to do the defendant's ability to control their conduct, and the other has to do with their knowledge of the wrongfulness of their acts. I'd like to address each of those separately, if I may.
Sure.
With regard to my opinion is that Ms. Clancy was, due to her mental disease, unable to conform her conduct to the requirements of the law on the day that she took the lives of her children. And let me give you the basis of that opinion. First of all, she was hearing a voice which was commanding her to engage in the killing behavior, and she did not feel any sense of control. She felt that she had to obey the instructions she was receiving. It was a matter where she was just following the command rather than being able to make any decision to do it or not. And for example, I asked Ms. Clancy.
No, you can't say what you Doctor. You can't. You cannot say what she told you. All right.
Okay. All right. I will not do that. Let me just make sure I'm covering other aspects of this. The second evidence that she was lacking control is the fact that she made a severe suicide attempt, also based on the command hallucination that she heard that day, so that she not only cut her throat and jumped out of a window, she very much wanted to die. Now, in my research on women who kill their children, I've divided the motives into 5 categories, and I want to look at how Ms. Clancy to those motives.
So tell us the 5 categories.
Yeah, the 5 categories are: first, altruistic filicide.
What does that
Secondly,
mean? What does that mean, altruistic filicide?
Altruistic filicide occurs when a murder is committed out of love rather than hostility. It is an effort on a mother's part to do what is best for the child. They may believe the child is, they may have a delusional belief the child is about to be tortured in their delusional mind, and they take their life in doing what they believe is in the best interest of the children based on their delusional idea. Altruistic filicide also occurs when a mother may plan to take her own life, and in her psychotic thinking and severe depression, it is distorted, and she may believe that the child will be worse off if she remains alive. So, for example, in Ms. Clancy's case, she believed that, as the jury has already heard, she was obsessional about caring for her children. She consulted with others at work to try and do exactly what was right for her children, and she believed that if she took that if Ms. Clancy took her own life, her children would be in terrible shape. And in her mind, she believed that she would be doing her children a favor by having them go to heaven with her rather than remain on earth without her doing the mothering. Her mind was very distorted like that.
Okay. So if you could just tell us the other titles of the other 4 types that you were referred to. Just tell it without getting into detail if they don't apply to Ms. Clancy.
All right. The second category does apply to Ms. Clancy, and that is it's called acutely psychotic filicide.
Okay.
And this occurs when someone is frankly psychotic. They may have delusions or hallucinations. They're out of touch with reality, and rather than having any rational motive, they're simply acting on their psychotic beliefs. So those 2 both apply to Ms. Clancy. The other 3.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, that's right. Just give us the other 3, the captions of them.
The other 3 which do not apply, one is called child maltreatment, in which a parent may shake the child to death or throw a child against a wall in an abusive manner. The next category is unwanted child, where someone, just for their convenience, the child is a burden and they kill the child for that motive. And the final motive is spouse revenge filicide. That is, someone hates their spouse so much that they're willing to sacrifice the child as a way to punish the spouse. And the 3 latter categories clearly do not apply to Ms. Clancy. She loved her husband, respected her husband, had a good marriage. She never spanked or ever abused her child, and all of her children were wanted. In fact, she planned to have a 4th child. So those 3 categories clearly do not apply. If I can explain.
She planned to have a 4th child. Why? Whose plan was that? Legitimately, whose plan was that? She had a large family. Oh, goodness gracious. That is the crux of Dr. Resnick's testimony. I'm going to fast forward to the cross, because he gets into, you got to hit this from all angles. She asked him questions about auditory hallucinations being some of the most easiest to fake. And what he has to say is valuable. So let's listen to it.
Anne?
Yes, please.
Good morning, Dr. Resnick. You've written, quote, "These live events are likely to prolong the parent's depression. The anniversary of the children's deaths and exposure to things that remind the parent of it are likely to be upsetting," correct?
Yes.
Things like birthdays and holidays and the anniversary of the killings would all be something that would be upsetting, correct?
They sometimes are, yes.
Now, you've written a lot about malingered psychosis, correct?
Yes.
And malingering psychosis, you can have a mental illness and your malingering could be exaggerating those symptoms or saying you have psychosis symptoms when you don't, correct?
That's correct.
And one of the things that you have written, and there's an article that you wrote called "Faking It," you've written in here, quote, "Command auditory hallucinations are easy to fabricate. Persons experiencing genuine command hallucinations do not always obey the voices, especially if doing so would be dangerous," correct?
That's correct.
You've also given some points to other practitioners. If you, quote, "If you suspect a person of malingered auditory hallucination, ask what he or she does to make the voices go away or diminish in intensity," correct?
Yes.
Because typically someone who hears a voice telling them to do something horrible like kill their child will try to resist that voice initially, correct?
That there's variability. Some do and some don't.
And in fact, the case you mentioned earlier, Andrea Yates, Miss Yates, in fact, committed herself to a hospital 5 times and tried to kill herself twice, all while trying to not kill her children, correct?
Yes.
She had heard voices for months and telling her to kill her children. And to resist those voices, she actually tried to kill herself, correct?
Until she could no longer resist the voices, yes.
Right. But she tried.
Right, as did Ms. Clancy.
Truly and sincerely, I don't understand this line of questioning by the prosecutor. I get it strikes me as she's trying to figure out ways to, like, these gotcha moments for Dr. Resnick. So isn't it true that it's like it's really easy to fake auditory hallucinations, right? Yes. And isn't it true that you wrote the book that if somebody is claiming an auditory hallucination, then you have this strategy to figure out that if it's actually real or not? Yes. And so then, in your opinion, knowing that you have all of these strategies and knowing that you have all this experience, do you believe that Lindsay Clancy had auditory hallucinations? Yes. All right. So what are we doing? And then she brings up Andrea Yates, and she makes this case that she had these auditory hallucinations that she had resisted until she couldn't resist them. And then you heard Dr. Resnick say, yeah, and so did Lindsay. And what I don't understand is the fact that Andrea Yates was able to resist auditory hallucinations before she gave into them is not proof that Lindsay Clancy could have resisted her auditory hallucination on January 24th. Maybe Andrea Yates was mentally stronger than Lindsay Clancy. Maybe the auditory hallucination was much stronger in Lindsay Clancy in such there was no resisting. She says that it's like her body was taken over. She felt like she was a puppeteer, or a puppet being mastered by a puppeteer. She was not in control of her actions. There was nothing she could have done. And she's told that to Resnick, who we've just established because of the Commonwealth's cross-examination. We've just established that he's the kind of guy that you go to if you're trying to learn how to prove that somebody is faking an auditory hallucination. And in Philip Resnick's opinion, Lindsay Clancy's auditory hallucination was not malingered. So what are we doing with this line of questioning? I don't understand this line of questioning. I genuinely don't.
Well, according to the records and reports that we have that are in evidence, Ms. Clancy heard the voice and immediately acted, correct? According to those records? Is that correct?
Well, Ms. Clancy had impulses to harm her children, which she did resist until the command hallucination when she was overwhelmed, yes.
But according to the records and the testimony that we've had,
that's crucial. She did resist until she was overwhelmed. And so there's a breaking point. If I was defense attorney Reddington, I would examine that breaking point, but maybe he just feels like he doesn't have to, and probably doesn't. But she did resist until she was overwhelmed. And being overwhelmed seems to be the line that you can't come back from. It's the event horizon of psychosis. It's once you cross this threshold, there's no dismissing the auditory hallucination, whether it's benign or if it's malignant. It's something that you are controlled by. And Andrea Yates controlled it until she was, I'd imagine, overwhelmed. Lindsay Clancy controlled it until she was overwhelmed. That's what I've taken from this line of questioning.
she had an impulse in December one time to harm her children, correct?
I believe it was on 2 occasions that she mentioned it to her husband.
And then never again after that until her kids were killed, correct?
There were only 2 occasions she mentioned it, but she referred to having these horrible impulses. So that suggests to me she was dealing with it on an ongoing basis, although she mentioned it only twice to her husband.
But she never said she had thoughts to kill her children. She said she had thoughts to harm her children, correct?
Yes, but actually, I think it's clear that to harm her children was to kill her children.
Well, in the records where you say that she was so clear in presenting her symptoms to her doctors, she repeatedly was asked if she had any homicidal ideation, and she repeatedly said no, correct?
That's right, and she didn't in the initial parts of her treatment, but by late December and January is when she did have those impulses.
But what
and
she told
did not
her,
acknowledge them.
You know what you're witnessing right now? You guys, you need to appreciate it. If you're a law nerd, if you're a law junkie, if you're a true crime junkie, if you enjoy watching The Art of Trial, this is what's happening. This is like Tom Cruise on cross-examination, crossing Jack Nicholson, and he's gambling, and he's swinging for the fences, and he's up there trying to make Jack Nicholson admit that he ordered the code red. That's what's happening. The problem is she is underestimating Philip Resnick, because I didn't know he was this old, but he's 88 years old. And if I ever make it to 88 years old, it would be such a blessing to be as sharp as Dr. Resnick. But Resnick is not flummoxed by this line of questioning. He has a ready-made response, and this swing for the fences was a swing and a miss. She didn't get Philip Resnick to admit that he ordered the code red, so to speak. That's what just happened right now.
But what she told her doctors in December is that she had no homicidal ideation. She only reported suicidal ideation, correct?
Yes, and as noted, that's very common because people fear their children will be taken away.
So it's better to kill them than to have them taken away.
Sustained.
It's not better to kill them
Hold on, Doctor.
than to have them taken away.
That question.
What a stupid question. That was a question where she just got rattled because she didn't get the response she was expecting from Resnick. And so she just got objected to, and she got a sustain, and so she's kind of sulking right now.
Can that answer straight? Okay.
You say that she was very forthcoming in her symptoms to her medical providers, but she never told those medical providers that she had an impulse to harm her children, correct?
That's correct.
You also, in teaching people about malingering, about faking hearing voices or being psychotic, you give pointers of what people should look for, such as patient uses no strategies to diminish hallucinations. Patient states he obeys all commands, correct?
Yes.
You also, in a podcast, evidence entitled Identifying Malingering with Dr. Philip Resnick, you were asked about malingering, and you said, and asked about hearing voices, and you said, quote, so a common example I'll use in teaching is if you hear a voice out of the blue that says, kill your mother, your moral fiber would cause you to hesitate. But if you have concurrent delusion that your mother is an evil wizard, you're more likely to act on that command hallucination, correct?
He just testified that she had delusion. What do we call it? Like a delusional something. He said delusional. He testified just 20 minutes ago that she had delusions. And now she's stating that because she's literally stating, he said on a podcast that you're able to resist auditory hallucinations, command hallucinations, if your moral compass is not aligned with the command, I guess. But there's an exception, and it's unless you have delusions. He literally said 20 minutes ago that she had delusions. I forgot what he specifically said. He called it something. It was delusional something. Man, it was it's going to bother me. Delusional. No, I'm not going to find it. And it was delusional something. Oh, the delusion of influence. He talked about the delusion of influence, and where she was like a puppet and someone else was pulling the strings. That means even if she was morally opposed to the thing that she was being commanded to do, she couldn't because of the delusion. Somebody could resist a command auditory hallucination if they're not delusional, but it's the delusion of influence that pushes you overboard. Delusion of influence coupled with being overwhelmed creates the context for a psychotic event. That's my takeaway, man. Hey, I'm a law person. I'm not a medical person. I'm not a doctor. I'm as much of a lay person sitting here on this jury as you all are. And what I'm learning from Resnick is that if you have an auditory hallucination, you can resist if you're not delusional and you're not overwhelmed. Andrea Yates was able to resist until she became overwhelmed. And there's also possibly some religious delusion going on. Lindsay Clancy, he just said, was overwhelmed. And he also said she was delusional. That is the backdrop for a psychotic event. What am I missing? If I'm missing anything, let me know in the comments. I'm not seeing it. I don't get the gravity of these questions. I don't get the points of these questions. I don't get the points that the Commonwealth is trying to score with these questions. She's flailing.
Correct.
And there's no evidence in the records or in the testimony that we've had thus far that Ms. Clancy believed that her children were evil or that they were possessed or that there was any danger posed by them or to them by such forces, correct?
Instead, Ms. Clancy.
Well, it's a yes or no question, Doctor.
No, go ahead. You can answer that.
Instead, Ms. Clancy had the psychotic, distorted belief that her children would be better off in heaven rather than being motherless. So that was her psychotic distortion, coupled with the command hallucination. So she met the exact requirement you're referring to.
And you
Why would she ask him that question? Did you hear what he just said? So she met the requirement that you're referring to. I got to replay that. I not only did she not get him to admit that he ordered the code red, but he literally just told her that she ordered the code red. That's basically what happened. I got to hear that again.
Heaven rather than being motherless. So that was her psychotic distortion, coupled with the command hallucination. So she met the exact requirement you're referring to.
Ouch. You know what, man? I've had some bad cross-examinations in my career over the course of 12 years. But that one would have stung. If that happened to me, if I had a cross-examination answer come back like that, I would be thinking about it for months. It would keep me up awake at night for months. 3:30 in the morning, waking up, and it's like, oh, looks like he met your criterion or your whatever he said. Like, God damn it, why did I ask that? What was I thinking? It was a Chris Darden moment. Oh, here, let's try on the gloves. Let's not account for the shrinkage that occurs from when something gets wet and then it dries. Leather, no less. Dumbass. I mean, he's not a dumbass. He's not. But it was a stupid moment. It was a mistake that he made, and he made it in real time. This was a Chris Darden moment. It was like, I mean, he gave her the worst possible answer she could possibly receive. And I'm going to play it one more time for posterity.
Rather than being motherless. So that was her psychotic distortion, coupled with the command hallucination. So she met the exact requirement you're referring to.
So she met the exact requirement you're referring to. Ouch. 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 Oh, it hurts. Everything hurts. Oh. I don't even know. That's so bad. It's so bad. I'm not trying to be pro-defense or pro-Commonwealth, but just as a lawyer, if I were to get that kind of a response from somebody I'm cross-examining, I might retire. I might just, you know what? I'm not cut out for this. I quit. And I'd probably be talked out of quitting. I'm just saying I would need like a good month off to think about what I did and correct it. Whatever I did, it didn't work out. Jesus. Oh boy. Man. I got to move this along at some point. We got to, I think that was, did we get to the, You know what? I'm going to let this go for a couple more minutes, and then we're going to go on to today's testimony.
And you believe that was her psychotic delusion that they would be better off in heaven without her, because according to your report, you could figure out no rational, non-psychotic motive for her to kill her children, correct?
Yes.
And so just because you can't figure out a motive or you don't know a motive or the person doesn't tell you a motive doesn't mean that there actually isn't a motive.
I missed Runkle's live stream. I really got to hit him up to go on the show or something. Are we going to collaborate or something? I was once going to go on the show, and then it didn't happen for whatever reason. He just started streaming on this case. I'm fascinated to know what he had to say about it. But if he said something about a ripcord line ready to pull when it goes bad, That's absolutely personal. Yeah, you know what? I'm just going to stop asking this guy questions. It's not working out. It is not. That was as bad of a cross-examination event. Her questions weren't necessarily bad. She just asked the wrong person. Why would you ask this guy? Was she hoping that he was like senile? Was she hoping that he lost his fastball? I don't know, man, but he's 88 years old and he's sharp as a tack. And she stepped in it, man. What could I say? I got to go back and hear what Runkle said. But yeah, I agree. Attorney's got to have a ripcord. Know when it's time to pull the plug. Know when you should not be asking this person any more questions. It didn't work out. You tried, you swung, and you missed. Move on to the next one. That's it.
There was a motive.
But that's not what I asked you. I did not ask you about Ms. Clancy. I said, just because someone tells you that they don't have a motive or you can't figure out a motive doesn't mean they didn't actually have a motive, correct?
That's possible, yes.
You also state in another article identifying malingering with Dr. Philip Resnick, you point out that the rapid resolution of symptoms with medication can be a red flag, as genuine psychotic symptoms usually take longer to subside, correct?
Oh, that's correct.
Were you aware from the Tewksbury records that on page 1136, it says Ms. Clancy has been clinically stable since her admission. There have been no events of affective, cognitive, or behavioral instability since her admission, and that Ms. Clancy has not evidenced any challenges in accepting and conforming to the rules and standards. Did you review that
Yes,
note?
I'm aware of that.
Okay. Were you also aware on page 1168 that it says Ms. Clancy denies that she has ever experienced hallucinatory content prior to or since that event, referring to when she killed her children, correct?
Yes.
And you're aware on page 1170, it states Ms. Clancy presents with intact reality testing and no observable symptoms of psychosis. She is actively engaged in treatment. She is able to identify possible hopes for her future, including serving as an activist for postpartum psychosis awareness and participating in a wheelchair marathon. Were you aware of that?
Yes.
I move to submit these three sections as the next three exhibits.
All right. Any objection? No. All right. Are those part of the Tewksbury records are already in?
Yes.
Okay, those may be admitted.
I'm going to fast forward this. Resnick killed it. He's been the strongest, most credible witness that we've heard from throughout this entire trial. And I promise you right now, this prosecutor is sitting there going over this testimony over and over and over and over and over again. This is the kind of cross-examination that gets lawyers to retire, to quit. This is the kind of cross-examination that gets lawyers to drink or abuse other substances. It was that bad. It was really bad. And I don't know who told her it was a good idea to go into that line of questioning, but she did, and she got what she was asking for, I guess. Now, compare that testimony to Dr. Mack, and you're just going to see there is a distinct difference in the credibility of these expert witnesses. Let me skip ahead to 358. Number one, this guy wasn't very likable. By all accounts, nobody liked this guy. He came off and he was giving like perfect testimony to the Commonwealth. But when it came time to cross-examination, all of a sudden he didn't know what the word investigation meant. He was very off-putting, he was very condescending, and his diagnoses were not very credible. But I think it was here. I'll start it there. But just to go over some of his credentials, you juxtapose him with Resnick, and this is what you get. So he been a psychiatrist for 22 years, so 41 years less than Resnick. He went to Michigan, and as a guy that lived in Ohio, that's another strike against him. Cornell Medical School, good for him. Brigham residency. I shouldn't be like that to this guy. He's got impressive credentials. He's just not 63 years in like Resnick, who's like the leading authority, even at 88 years old, in expert witness testimony. He did a fellowship, a child fellowship at Columbia. He went to NYU where he got a forensic fellowship. He was a professor at Thomas Jefferson. He practices at Nemours Children's Hospital. He's on the board of certified in psychiatry, child and adolescent, and forensic psychiatry. He interviewed Lindsay on April 10th and 12th of 2026, which is exactly 3 years and 3 months after the event. Dr. Resnick interviewed her 3 months after the event. So what you're going to hear is he's going to give his diagnosis of what he thinks was wrong with her 3 years after the fact.
As far as kind of before we move on to your actual diagnosis, in addition to the interview that you had with the defendant over those 2 days, reviewing all the records, did you attempt to speak with what are called collaterals?
I did not.
Is that something that you sometimes do in these evaluations?
Sometimes.
Fair to say in this particular case, you did have a significant amount of information from people that were close to the defendant, right?
That was my view, yes.
And after speaking with the defendant, did she identify to you some people that maybe you could talk to?
I don't remember who she said, but I think she suggested perhaps her husband or then husband.
But you yourself didn't have an interview with Patrick Clancy, did you?
No.
But you were able to review his grand jury testimony and interviews he's given with the police in the past, right?
Yes, I did. And CPS.
And as far as speaking with the defendant's parents or her sister, are you aware that attempts were made or requests were made to speak with them, but they didn't respond?
I wasn't aware of that. I was not.
So based on everything that you reviewed in this case, were you able to come to a conclusion about diagnosis?
Yes, I did.
And at the time that you conducted this evaluation, what is your opinion about diagnosis?
My opinion about her diagnosis in the span from 2022 to 2023 is that she suffered from what's called a major depressive episode. That probably is a part of what's called a major depressive disorder. But the important point about it is a major depressive episode.
What made you come to that conclusion based on her presentations?
The information about her feelings and the progression of her illness highlighted that it was best represented by a major depressive episode. It's a condition defined in DSM-5 where an individual displays problems with mood, problems with feeling pleasure, feelings of guilt or worthlessness, problems with appetite, problems with sleep, preoccupation with death or suicide, poor concentration, poor energy, perhaps also what's called psychomotor agitation or retardation. So one doesn't necessarily need to show all of those, but as it is in the DSM criteria sets, one needs to have a certain threshold. And her history and her description of her experience, in my view, matched a major depressive episode.
Okay. And you indicated that it was kind of a progressive thing from the fall into January of 2023, right?
Yes.
And in addition to the low mood, were you able to identify that she presented with anxiety at various points?
Yes, very much.
And did you also make observations of obsessive thinking?
Yes, obsessive thinking is a kind of anxiety where you repeatedly think about a topic, maybe that you're asking, what if? And it's the kind of form of anxiety that you frequently see in an anxiety disorder called generalized anxiety disorder. I think it's possible she also had generalized anxiety disorder, but that is sort of secondary to the major depressive episode.
Okay. Now, in the time closest to January 24th of 2023, did you take a look at what her presentation or what her mental state was then, based on all the information that you had available to you?
Yes, I did.
Did you identify whether she was ever presenting in a manic state or a hypomanic state?
Throughout the period from 2022 to 2023, no. There was never indication of any element of mania or hypomania.
So just to make it kind of clear to the jury here, when you talk about
There was never any element of mania or hypomania. I wonder if because if I'm sitting on the jury, I've heard multiple experts now tell me that she had symptoms of mania. Now here comes this guy on the rebuttal case for the Commonwealth saying she had no symptoms of mania. I wonder how many of the jurors just instantly disregarded him as a witness. Okay, you say she has no symptoms of mania. I heard like 5 others tell me that she had symptoms of mania. I mean, that could have been like a dismissive moment for a jury member in and of itself. I'm going to fast forward a little bit just for time's sake, because he gets into some specifics on his diagnosis. Like, for example, she asked her mother, "Can you hear my thoughts?" And when the answer was no, reality testing, which was one of the points that she tried to ask Dr. Resnick about malingering, about I don't think she asked him specifically that. But what Dr. Mack says is because she accepted mom's answer of no, then it was an indication that she wasn't delusional and that she had her wits about her. So let me fast forward to that. To me, that was the most interesting moment of testimony that he had for this day. Here we go. Oops. All right.
So those are 2 that I would mention right off the bat.
What about the idea that somebody could hear her thoughts? Did you look into that?
There was one episode where she wasn't sure and asked her mother, I believe, the question, "Can you hear my thoughts?" And was told no. And so while there is a form of psychosis called thought broadcasting, that wasn't her belief. That wasn't her belief that she was engaging in thought broadcasting where she was putting her thoughts out into the world. As I read it, the question was not psychotic. The question was one that reflected the distress and the intrusive thoughts that she was having without it necessarily being psychotic. She engaged in reality testing when she asked. Did you hear that?
And you had the conversation with her about thought broadcasting in your interview, correct?
Yes.
And you were able to ask some follow-up questions of her directly to identify whether she was or wasn't doing that.
Yes.
And based on your conversation with her and what you learned in that interview, did you believe that she was engaged in thought broadcasting?
No, I do not.
You're aware that there were also concerns that were voiced by her that there was other things wrong with her body, not just damage from medication, right?
Yes.
Do you recall that?
Yes.
Did you consider that to determine whether that was a psychotic feature for this defendant?
Yes. So an example was her worry that she had ketoacidosis. I didn't necessarily think that was psychotic. It may have been wrong, but it wasn't necessarily psychotic. She had been given a medication, Seroquel, where one of the side effects is that it negatively interferes with your glucose system. And ketoacidosis is the worst case scenario when you have poor control of your glucose. So I don't know that she had a fixed false belief that she had ketoacidosis, but she was worried about having ketoacidosis.
So when you say that you considered these things and you didn't believe them to be psychotic, are you talking about them in the realm of, were they delusional? Were they fixed false beliefs or something else?
Right. So I use that term specifically. As I said before, a delusion, which is a form of psychosis, is a fixed false belief, which is really immutable. You can't be convinced otherwise. But these were not fixed false beliefs. These were concerns.
And did you find that the concerns were rational based on your overall view of everything?
Right. Not only were they concerns, but they aligned with the realities that she had experienced.
Now, what about the idea of these intrusive thoughts? You reviewed the records to know that was a common report of her, that she had intrusive thoughts, correct?
Yes.
And that at various points she did identify that she did want to die.
Yes.
Is being suicidal a form of psychosis?
No.
What, if anything, does the idea of suicide tell you about this defendant or about her situation?
Well, it tells me that she was suffering and that it was a part of, in my view, it was a part of a major depressive episode. 10-15% of women in the postpartum period have depressive disorders, and it can be very serious, and it can lead to suicidality or the need for hospitalization or other interventions. So the records show in my interviews that I gathered information that she was suffering, and suicidality is a form of suffering.
Now, when you're talking about suicidality, does it have to make sense why the person is suicidal?
No, suicidality occurs, but it doesn't always make sense. Sometimes there might be places where one might say, well, why was that person suicidal? They had only good things in life, speaking hypothetically. But especially when an individual has depression, it just occurs.
Now, when you're talking about people that have suicidal ideation, are there certain things known as protective factors?
Yes.
And did you identify in your review of this case in the records whether the defendant presented with any described to you?
I'm going to fast forward a little bit to the, I guess, most salacious moment of testimony where he gives his account of how she interacted with the children on that day. And he made reference to these where she says, go to God, her accounts being that the voice had told her that she should kill the kids. This is your last chance so that you can kill yourself. It was right after Patrick had left. This is his impressions of what happened.
When she heard this voice?
Her experience that is called a voice occurred in the late afternoon.
Do you recall what she reported about the voice?
Her experience was that the voice was of a male and it was loud.
And what did the voice say?
The voice said to the effect of, you should kill the kids. This is your last chance so that you can kill yourself.
And what did she say happened after she heard this voice?
She engaged in the activity of taking her children's lives.
And she was able to describe to you how she did that, correct? And she first stated that she took Dawson down to the basement?
Yes.
And then wrapped the exercise band around his neck and strangled him?
Yes.
And what did she say that she said when she did that?
She described that while that was happening, she was saying out loud, go to God.
And did she describe the same for both Cora and then Callan?
Essentially, yes.
And the voice that she said she heard, was it one time or more than one time she heard the voice?
Multiple times is what she described.
And after she had killed the kids, did the voice continue in her report?
I don't remember that it did. It may have, I don't remember.
And then after the kids were gone, she then made an effort to take her own life, correct? And how did she do that?
Right, so she did. She described that she went ahead to take her life or attempt to take her life with multiple steps. She went to her room upstairs in the house and took the various medications that were present. She cut at her wrists and at her neck, and then she caused herself to fall from the window.
Okay, and as far as going out the window, did she tell you whether she had to do anything with the screen?
She described to me that she cut the screen.
Okay, and then she dove out the window.
Well, objection, that's not what he said.
Well, what did she do after she cut the screen?
She fell from the window.
Did you ask her, or was there conversation about the phone call that she received from Patrick?
There was.
And was she able to clearly identify when the call came from Patrick?
I don't exactly recall exactly when, but it was sometime in the around 18 to 20 minutes that this was happening that she received that call.
Do you recall if part of the conversation about the timeline of events, whether the voice came as soon as Patrick left the house or before or after the phone call?
My recollection is that it happened as soon as Patrick had left.
Now, were there some things in what she was telling you about the events that was different from what you reviewed from other information in this case?
Can you say that again?
Yeah, I'm just asking if you recall that there were things in the version that she told you in your interview that were different or not consistent with the information you knew about the case.
Well, two things come to mind. One is the locking or the closing of the bedroom door, and the other is the cutting of the screen of the window.
Okay, and as far as the locking or closing of the bedroom door, do you recall what she told you about that?
She denied that she had done that.
And so from the information you reviewed about reports from Patrick and everything else, did you know that the door had been locked?
That was my understanding.
And the second thing that you indicated about the screen, what information did you have about the screen that was different from what she reported to you?
I'm going to fast forward
Maintain
a
a
little
substantial
bit.
capacity to conform her conduct to the requirements of the law?
I think that in the household, she was engaging in this activity methodically, which highlights to me that there was an ability to conform her behavior to expectations of living in a household.
That's directly in opposition to every expert that's testified that when you're in a psychotic moment, you're allowed to be able to do things, or you have the capability to do things methodically. I know this is a point that he made, that, hey, it seems like she had a plan, and she was methodically going through the children one by one. And that's evidence that she wasn't experiencing a moment of psychosis, or that she had the ability to conform her behavior to the law. But every expert that has testified as to somebody being in the midst of psychosis have all said without fail that you could appear normal, you could communicate, you can methodically do things. And so once again, I think Sam Sarah said, we could have disregarded this guy off of his test, off of his experience. To be fair to him, he's got 22 years. I mean, he's not 63 years, but it's not chump change either. 22 years. But the fact that we have learned from experts in this case that psychosis could look completely normal to the point where you're able to conduct yourself normally, methodically do things, to plan, to scheme, to communicate, to do all the things while you're in the throes of a psychosis, and he's not acknowledging that, to me, he's lost credibility with me forever on this case.
What do you mean methodically?
As I understand the deaths, they were done methodically, and I think you asked me about that earlier, one by one, in a way that was organized and that was intended to achieve a particular goal. Similarly, her attempt at suicide was organized and thoughtful in a sense that it included as many possible methods as possible.
And as far as the killings of the children methodically, did she report to you in any way that she was given direction by this voice on how to complete the act and what exactly to do?
No, she did not.
And what about the call with Patrick? Is there anything about that indicates that she maintained some control or the ability to control herself, where she did engage in a short conversation with him?
Well, that aligns with what we were talking about before in terms of being aware that he would disapprove or disallow this, and yet she didn't say anything. She didn't say help, or she didn't say, I'm having these thoughts, so it wasn't stated. Okay.
So again, as far as your overall evaluation of this defendant, Lindsay Clancy, regarding the events of January 24th, 2023, what ultimately is your opinion to a degree of medical certainty regarding criminal responsibility?
My opinion is that she retained the capacity that required for having criminal responsibility for these actions.
Thank you. Oh, and I would just like to admit, Dr. Mack.
All right, I'm going to move on to Reddington's cross, and I'm going to start here, and then we're going to move on to today's testimony. And by the way, folks, I know I'm going a little bit late tonight. If you feel the need to duck out, don't feel bad about it, man. Hey, get your rest. I understand. I'm trying to cover 2 days of heavy testimony. And so if you wanted to watch it with the replay crew in the morning, I completely get it. And you know what? That's probably the more sensible approach. But for me, I'm going to carry on to Reddington's cross. We're going to get to some of the highlights from today, and then we're going to do what we normally do. I think it started at 6:43 here. He's going to basically clown him for not having any experience to basically testify on such matters. Oh, there's also a case that he worked on where he was found to not be competent enough to be an expert in that case. I'll probably replay that.
That was all adult, and Georgetown has its own labor and delivery unit. And so that was plenty of engagement with women who were pregnant or who had just given birth. And then at both Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and at Nemours, there are these special units that have been designed for the last several years of high-risk pregnancy units. So actually at CHOP, one of my first roles there was to develop the psychiatry services coverage of the high-risk maternity unit there called the Special Delivery Unit. And I was the co-leader and then the leader of the consultation service at CHOP. And so I led the group of adult and child psychiatrists to tend to the psychiatric needs of that unit. Recently at Nemours, the same unit was built. And so, yes, in these pediatric hospitals, there actually are units of women who are about to have birth, who have just had birth.
Well, I'm sure in these pediatric hospitals, there are women about to have birth and have had birth, and I'm sure that there are competent doctors that treat them, correct?
I agree with you.
How about you? How many women with postpartum psychosis have you treated?
Roughly 10 would be my estimate.
Over what period of time?
Over the period since 2001.
And when you would treat these women, would you be involved in, for example, testing them for their mental health?
Well, usually the teaching has been that what was called postpartum psychosis is actually a form of bipolar disorder. So what is important is to say, let's do a full evaluation of the individual's symptoms and signs, and then treat them and engage in treatment. And usually that's going to be a form of bipolar disorder treatment. That's the teaching that is the general perspective.
So with your wealth of knowledge on women that are pregnant and suffering from postpartum psychosis, do you know whether or not Lindsay was ever diagnosed with postpartum depression?
I believe that the various notes from the clinicians over the year of 2022 to 2023 utilized the term unspecified mood disorder.
Right.
Yeah, I think it'd be appropriate for him to just exit stage left with his wealth of knowledge on these postpartum cases. Oh, I love Reddington so much, man. Oh, he's just it's a mismatch in terms of lawyerly skills, trial skills, to the point where I sort of kind of feel bad for the Commonwealth. But at the same time, I'm going to pick this up at day 19, which was today. And Reddington is going to resume his cross-examination. He's going to bring up this case, LeBron versus Secretary. It was a federal case where the federal court found that Dr. Mack, I've heard him referred to online as Mack the Quack, well, that court found him not qualified to be an expert in that case, and we're going to talk about that. Let me pull that up. I'm going to have to switch screens because it's a different. All right, here we go. I got to share this screen now, and then we'll be good to go.
LeBron versus the Secretary of DCF, 710 Fed 3rd, 1202 in Florida. You remember that case, I'm sure, right?
I do.
And in Feder, there was a gentleman, Mr. Feder LeBron, who was a Navy veteran, who was a single father and had a child. And he was a member or a person that was able to get benefits from what's called TANF, T-A-N-F, Temporary Aid to Needy Families. You remember that?
I do.
And the state of Florida decided that because needy families consisted of either minorities or drug users or people that would not be reliable to work in the confines of working underneath the TANF, so they wanted to have blood testing and drug testing of all the people that were temporary aid to needy families, right?
That's your conception of what was happening with that.
Well, it's my conception from reading the case, sir. Do you agree, sir, that TANF is an acronym for Temporary Aid to Needy Families?
Yes, it is.
Do you agree, sir, that this gentleman, Mr. Feder LeBron, was a plaintiff in a lawsuit against the state of Florida?
Yes.
Do you agree, sir, that it was in federal court?
Yes.
You agree, sir, that in federal court, the court held that, in fact, you were unqualified to give an opinion that you attempted to give, saying that it was perfectly appropriate to test by way of urine or blood people that are benefiting from the TANF program, because your testimony was that they belong to a class of people that, I guess, had to be tested. Right?
I don't agree with your conceptualization.
Okay, so the court ultimately ruled that your argument, your testimony on behalf of the state of Florida, the government, and you indicated that TANF benefits, applicants for TANF were people that were involved with drug use, violence, and higher rates of suicide. Remember those words, those three words?
The testimony that I provided.
Do you remember
is-
testifying, sir, about the people that are the beneficiaries of the TANF program, people that need aid because of needy families, are people that should be tested by way of blood or urine? And your argument, sir, was because they are of a class that would be more likely to commit a crime or have suicide or drug use. Did you testify to that?
That is not the way that that testimony or that report was presented. No,
Okay,
I would disagree.
so your answer is no. Let's keep it that way. Your answer is no.
I don't understand why he would look. The court made a ruling. He wasn't experienced enough to be an expert, or didn't know enough to be an expert. He was not qualified to be an expert. Just leave it at that. Why is he like pushing back? I don't agree with your analysis. Well, it doesn't matter. That was the ruling. What do you want me to say? I think Dr. Mack is of all the expert witnesses that they could have picked, they should have done some research and figured out that, yeah, this guy might not be. I mean, number one, just as a show of unity, as a show of credibility, as a show of strength of force, of intellectual might, perhaps your expert witnesses should at the very least agree on the diagnosis of Lindsay Clancy. We're pretty much done with Dr. Mack. It was a waste of time, honestly. We're going to move on to, what was the guy's name? Well, there was was it not? It's not Red. Who's the other expert's name? I just said it like not Raygun. I can't. Anyway, the guy that's testifying after Spinelli today. I'm going to remember. It's going to piss me off, but they don't even agree on the diagnosis for Lindsay Clancy. So they brought two experts on rebuttal, and they're supposed to counter necessarily the defense's experts. And the defense experts are as credible and as qualified as you could possibly get, at least with respect to Resnick. And then we get to these two, and they can't even agree on a diagnosis for Lindsay Clancy. How does that help? How does that help? And that's something that the Commonwealth would have known before putting these witnesses on. I mean, if they can't agree on the diagnosis, at least find another expert where they're in unison. Is she bipolar or not bipolar? Is it bipolar 2 or bipolar 1? Is it bipolar 2 or 1, or is it major depressive disorder? Because I can't have you guys disagreeing, because that's opening the door to reasonable doubts. It's really bad. It's really bad. And so, you know what? Let me, I'm going to fast forward to 143.
So you recall, sir,
because he's starting to talk about his diagnoses again. Here we go.
says too, and incorporated into his report, your report, his diagnosis. What was that?
No, offhand, I don't remember what his diagnosis
Okay.
was.
How about Meg Spinelli? Did you have a chance to review her report
Spinelli.
and incorporate that into your report?
Heilbrun is the guy.
I reviewed her report.
Do you know what her diagnosis was, sir?
I believe it was bipolar type 1.
Right. So with all of the various healthcare providers that have an opinion of bipolar type 1, would you agree that that is a very strong indicator that a person could very well be suffering from postpartum depression?
I'm confused by your question because that last piece is not necessarily inconsistent with the diagnosis of major depressive episode.
I'm asking you, sir, about
What I discussed the other day was when that specifier is able to be used, that would be a diagnostic question.
So with the understanding that nurse practitioner Gelada is bipolar, or looking at bipolar, that Zeisel report, you don't know or recall what it is, but you incorporated it into your report. Dr. Resnick is bipolar 2. You feel that this is or is not indicative of a precursor to a person suffering from postpartum depression? It's in the books, in the articles, right?
Your use of terms, to me, seems apples and oranges. The question of postpartum depression would be, does the person have a mood disorder, and is it in the time frame following birth?
I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
So,
I can't. Can you say that again, please?
It doesn't matter what he said. I'm going to fast forward, but just notice the juxtaposition of this guy, Dr. Mack, versus Dr. Resnick, and the confidence with what Resnick spoke when he was being crossed by the Commonwealth. And this guy, he's being hit with these clear contradictions in his diagnostic abilities. And he has, number one, been identified as a fraud, at least in a federal case, dating back to whenever that case was. Now he's on the defensive. And because he doesn't have 63 years of experience where he could rely on his record to give him all the credibility he needs, and he knows that, rather than just give straight answers to preserve whatever credibility he does have, he's sitting here on the defensive. And he's saying all these ridiculous things. Now he's made a diagnosis of non-bipolar, non-psychosis, all of those things. And so all Reddington has to do at this point is hit him with all of the symptoms that all the other experts said point to psychosis, point to mania, point to bipolar, and so forth. And ask him to say, okay, now she exhibited these questions, and you still say she doesn't have these things. And his answers at this point are ridiculous. Here's another example of it. I'm going to fast forward to 216.
we're talking.
And he's going to give another ridiculous answer.
Major research project, along with the Department of Mental Health, dealing with postpartum psychosis, would indicate that hearing voices, a voice commanding her to act, is a symptom of postpartum psychosis. Do you agree with that? Yes or no? Just give me a yes or no.
I can't answer that.
Okay, the answer is no. The answer is no.
All right, he just doesn't agree with it. Next question.
We answered these questions several times now.
Really?
Overruled. You're gonna let him ask that question if you want to ask that again.
So let's move on, sir, so we don't fight over nothing.
That's a bad objection. The fact that he couldn't just agree to that, and just simply disagree to, hey, so if she's hearing a voice, that's not a symptom of psychosis. He says no, or don't agree, or whatever he said, whatever non-answer he gave. And he had every opportunity to clarify it. And the Commonwealth realizes and sees what's going on. And she gives an objection because she's getting nervous, sitting there shuffling in her seat with nothing better to do. And every attorney has been there, and that sucks. But hey, she picked her experts. And so I'm going to fast forward to the next witness, Heilbrun. He was the second Commonwealth expert to rebut the defense's case. What did I say? I said Heilbrun? Heilbrun. Heilbrun. Not Heilberg. I'm thinking of Heisenberg, Breaking Bad. It's Heilbrun. Kirk Heilbrun. Kirk Heilbrun. They didn't agree on the same diagnosis. And I've never actually worked on a case where there was multiple experts in a case where they disagreed on what the prevailing diagnosis was. In a civil case or in a criminal case or in a family case for that matter. So this was an odd event to me. So I'm going to fast forward to 4 hours and we're going to hear from Heilbrun. And he's going to talk about their differential diagnosis. Here we go.
Her together on 2 days. We took that information and we each independently came up with our own report, our own review of that information, our own analysis of what it meant, and so on. So, no, we wrote separate reports. We actually did not agree on the diagnosis.
Now, if we could have the PowerPoint. In terms of your
So they don't agree on
evaluation of Ms.
diagnosis. Now he's
Clancy,
going to talk about their
I've been
voice.
hearing a voice like you're hearing my voice right now. It comes from outside of your head. And that's a different kind of a symptom than having thoughts, even unwelcome and intrusive thoughts that are in your head. If it's coming from outside, that is very likely a psychotic symptom. And if it's a psychotic symptom, then that has different implications for what's wrong with you, as opposed to something that is unwelcome and intrusive, but inside your own head.
and Doctor, the way she described these thoughts that she was having in December about harming herself, in the medical records and in her conversations with you, she described those as unwelcome but internal thoughts, correct?
Yes, that's right. It was important because of what I just said, that I asked her the question, when you were experiencing these thoughts, were they like your own thoughts or were they like auditory hallucinations? And she said they were like my own thoughts. And she made it clear that they were unwelcome and intrusive, but they were like my own thoughts. And she didn't get to talking about experiencing auditory hallucinations, as I will talk about a little bit later, until January 24th.
That's honestly his most effective point of the whole day. And honestly, of the last 2 days, that's the best point that the Commonwealth has scored in 2 days of their rebuttal testimony. The fact that she labeled this voice as internal as opposed to external, and internal being an indication of these are intrusive thoughts, but not necessarily auditory hallucinations. Auditory hallucinations happen to be external voices that you would hear as if you're hearing something outside your body. And Lindsay described them to him as internal. That's the strongest point that they've made and that they're going to make for all of day 19 and day 18 combined.
And so she continued to have real difficulty with various kinds of problems. She had lost about 15 pounds, not intending to. She was having tremors and sweating and GI symptoms and sadness, severe depression, that sort of thing, as she described it. Feeling numb and zombie-like were her words, again in December. And then by middle December, it was getting very difficult for her.
So we've heard all of this before, so I'm going to fast forward to the basis for his diagnosis, what convinced him about the bipolar. And the other thing is, I'm struggling to rationalize why the Commonwealth would introduce an expert witness to state that he thinks that she was bipolar, knowing full well that the defense's theory of the case is that SSRIs caused an interaction in a bipolar person that induced psychotic events. Part of that is probably just the candidness that's required of being an attorney. And look, you can't just make up evidence. If she had bipolar, she had bipolar. But then why bring in Dr. Mack at all? I mean, I honestly have no idea what he was good for in this case, other than to say that he was an unworthy expert. He had been questioned on his expertise in prior cases to the point where they said, yeah, this guy's not an expert. We shouldn't listen to him. He had different diagnoses from the actual credible experts of the Commonwealth, and he disagreed with every other expert that's testified in this case. At the very least, Heilbrun is stating that, yeah, I think she was bipolar. He's going to give her reasons why, and he seems to be coherent. He's actually made a strong point that they could actually mark and lodge, and that, hey, the voices were internal. They weren't external. That's a hallmark of not of psychosis, but that she's having intrusive thoughts that are inward, not psychotic, not postpartum psychosis, but something else. And so at the very least, hitting back at the defense's theory, all Mack did was bolster the defense's theory, in my opinion, if I'm just keeping it real. So here he's going to give the basis for his bipolar diagnosis.
like she was really feeling good and getting back into exercise and things like that. So it's one of those considerations where the thing that sort of gave me pause for a while in diagnosing a bipolar disorder is that I didn't see that manic episode. But what really convinced me is that she's been at Tewksbury now for more than 3.5 years. And the diagnosis of record at Tewksbury is bipolar disorder. And they are, as I read the records, very careful about what they prescribe and how much, and various other kinds of considerations. And one of the things that the records reflect is that when she was on some medication that's prescribed to help stabilize her mood, and it was discontinued for medical reasons, she had a kind of immediate response to that, which is to say, she noticed it, and that's a consideration as well. So I ended up with making a diagnosis of bipolar 2 disorder, which is a slightly less, not slightly, it's a less severe form of bipolar disorder.
And doctor, why did you diagnose with bipolar 2 and not bipolar?
Because bipolar, as I said, is a more severe kind of diagnosis. It's more noticeable. And if you had a bipolar diagnosis, then I would want to see something that clearly and definitely looks like a manic episode. And I did not see any evidence of that before January 24th of 2023.
And there were some incidents that have been described by witnesses who have testified and in the medical records, things like the defendant cleaning out her garage with her husband at one point in time. Was that something that you did or did not see as manic, and why?
Well, there was some indication in the records that some people thought it was manic. I did not see it that way. She did not describe, when I asked her, whether she did not describe that as a manic episode. She didn't think it was. And when I talked to Patrick Clancy, he said he didn't think it was either. And basically it was cleaning out the garage and getting a lot of stuff into 20 trash bags and so on. But one of the things he said is, they were both working hard, but it wasn't all her out there putting stuff in 20 trash bags, and he wasn't a part of it. He said he was definitely a part of it.
Okay. And would it be accurate that bipolar disorder requires that period of mania for, I believe, 7 days, where bipolar 2 requires hypomania for 4 days? Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
And so did you see signs of hypomania?
Well, that's something where it's less clear that it's manic. And that's one of the things that inclined me toward bipolar 2 is I just did not see signs that were clearly manic episodes, but it looked like something that it possibly could have been a less serious or less severe manic episode.
And in terms of this diagnosis, this bipolar 2, is there a way to determine whether she always had this disorder or if it's something new, and if it's something new, when it appeared?
It's a disorder that typically comes on in adulthood. It's not something that you have as a kid or even for the most part as an adolescent. It's something that you start to show the signs of when you are in your 20s or 30s.
Okay. And so at this point, would it be time to move on to number 8 on your PowerPoint?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to move on to where he starts talking about the voices.
Something called the obsessional beliefs questionnaire has.
By the way, of the points that they made, this was the other big one that's been gnawing at a lot of you, including myself. So you're telling me that the voice that she only heard it on the 24th of January, only on that day, and never after the fact, ever. He's going to address that directly right here. And it's the other big point that he makes on his direct exam.
3 scales. One scale is kind of responsibility threat estimation, which is a belief about your personal responsibility and overestimation of threats. She was not elevated on that. A second was perfectionism and certainty. She was not elevated on that either, although she works hard and so on, but she was not elevated on the perfectionist aspect of this test right now. However, she was elevated on something called importance and control of thoughts, meaning that for her, it's always been important to be able to work hard and control what's going on with her mind and her life. And one of the things that I'm going to talk about in a few minutes that I think was making her depressed and hopeless and sad and so on is that she had been trying very hard since October to basically control the problems that she was having, and it wasn't working. It was not succeeding for her. Okay, and then there was something called the Lahoney-Slade hallucination scale. And so she endorsed the following things. Sometimes a passing thought will seem so real it frightens me. Sometimes I get distracted trying to concentrate on my work. That was something she endorsed back in 22 and 23. In the past, I've had the experience of hearing a person's voice and then found there was no one there. That was only on January 24th. I often hear a voice speaking my thoughts aloud, again, only on January 24th. I've been troubled by hearing voices in my head, again, only on January 24th. All right, so those were the psychological testing results, and I'm going to move to the last item on the PowerPoint here, which is why it was important for me to consider her motivation for killing her children. And this is something that, if you look at Lindsay Clancy, would be described as so out of character that I just like to know what could possibly have been going on. Because, for instance, when I talked to her and talked to her husband as well about how do you discipline your kids, it was never spanking, it was never hands-on, it was never anything like that. They both felt bad when they yelled at the kids. So it was one of those things that to imagine her doing something like this is really seems so out of character that I thought it was very important to try to figure out why it might have happened. So this is how I approached it. The other thing about the why question is it could well be something that is valuable to know when we're thinking about whether she understood that something was wrong, or when she was thinking about whether she could conform her conduct to the requirements of the law or control herself. The why question seemed important. So if I could have the next slide.
Sure. And in evaluating the why, did you come up with two possible explanations?
I did, yes, which is on the slide.
And so can you explain that, please?
I can, yes. There are a number of reasons in my experience why people harm one another, why people kill one another. And most of these reasons ended up not applying to Miss Clancy. I mean, it wasn't job related. She wasn't in the military or the police. It didn't have to do with money or property or fame or anger or being callous or abusive or being afraid or doing it himself. None of those there was any evidence for. But there were a couple of things that started to have some evidence for, and this is what it looked like. One is the psychosis, the possibility that she had a severe mental illness, experiencing hallucinations, delusions, that sort of thing. And as part of that, on January 24th, experienced those symptoms that we're going to talk about in a minute. And I'm calling that the first bullet point there, acute psychosis with command hallucinations. The second possible explanation was as part of an attempt to take one's own life, as part of a suicide, one might harm one's children if you thought that would prevent them from suffering. And let me see if I can give you an example of that. If one of us were to learn, and we had no doubt in our mind that the Holocaust was coming tomorrow, and we thought that was going to be awful, and I can't live through that, and so I'm going to take my own life. If I had children, the question might come up, do I take them with me? Do I take their lives as well? Now, I'm not saying that I would definitely do that, but what I'm saying is that it would come up as a possibility in what I thought about. And so there ended up being, in my mind, two possible explanations for why she did what she did. The first being the acute psychosis with command hallucinations, and the second being this was a serious suicide attempt, and she wanted the children to be with her so she wouldn't be separated from them, and so they wouldn't have to suffer after she was gone.
Yeah, that was my wife's theory, but that has not matched the Commonwealth's theory. So this was either a serious suicide attempt, and the Commonwealth spent like their entire case in chief trying to discredit that it was a serious suicide attempt, or it was a psychotic event, is what this doctor was saying. I'm going to fast forward a little bit to where he talks more about the voice only happening on that one occasion. And he's going to talk a little bit about it being a symptom only during the offense. It provides a convenient way of lessening your own culpability. And it's a common thing that people do, whatever. He's going to talk about malingering and his opinions on that after Resnick shared his opinions on that. And then we're going to get to the most explosive moment of the day that led to Reddington asking for a mistrial. And then we will call it a night. So before I do that, let me fast forward to 6:18. All right.
Is that she heard a voice that she'd never heard before, experienced an hallucination, and she's never experienced it since, but she only experienced it for the 18 minutes or so that it took to kill the children. And to put it mildly, that would be a very, very unusual pattern or manifestation of how this kind of thing comes about. Very unusual. I've been doing this kind of evaluation for many, many years, and I'm always very careful when someone tells me that they experience a symptom only during the course of committing an offense.
Why is that, doctor? Why are you careful when someone tells you that they only experience this voice during a criminal offense?
Well, because it provides a convenient way of lessening your own culpability. I mean, it's always possible, but as I said, I find it very, very rare. Whereas an explanation for why somebody did something, somebody might look at that and say, it's a convenient way of somebody looks at me and I don't have the same culpability that I would otherwise.
And what was the next part of evidence that you saw against acute psychosis?
There was some discussion of whether this was postpartum. And so she was about 8 months away from having given birth to Callan, her youngest child. And most of the explanations or most of the sources of authority like DSM-5 or the Cleveland Clinic will point to maybe 1 month after birth or 2 months after birth or something like that. But the farther away you get time-wise from the birth, the less likely it is under those kinds of authority to be postpartum. Now, it could be something else. And there were certainly some things that I saw that were symptoms of depression and other sorts of things that she experienced in January. But it was, given the time, it was less likely, I thought, to be postpartum. To look at those.
All right, fair enough. But, and it makes sense what he said. The farther out from the birth you get, the less likely postpartum is a factor. It's probably true. But we've also known that she was prescribed 13 different medications that were affecting her negatively, or she was trying to fine-tune some kind of a medication to figure out how to normalize. And at that point, what he's not answering is her symptoms that other doctors have described as, some have called it intrusive thoughts, some have called it mania, some have called it anxiety, some have called it postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, whatever, postpartum psychosis. It's been all over the place. All of her diagnoses are all over the place. All of her medications were all over the place. And how much of a factor did that play into inducing a psychosis in Lindsay Clancy? In a reasonable doubt standard, I can see where this would be headed for an acquittal with an open-minded jury, with lots of individuals that have experienced the realities of raising young children. My education in this case has come from so many of you telling me the auditory hallucinations that you have heard and your inability to just hand wave it away or disregard or ignore or whatever it is. And so I don't know what I don't know, and I don't know anything. I just know that not one of these experts has a definitive theory for a diagnosis for Lindsay Clancy that I can hang my hat on and say, yeah, I believe this guy or that guy or this girl or whoever. They all disagree. And so I'm going to by default, go to the person with the most experience, and that's Resnick. with all due respect to Mack and Heilbrun, they can't even agree, and they're on the same side, what Lindsay Clancy had. And so forgive me for being skeptical of their theories. It's another one of many theories in this case that point in different directions, which doesn't do anything to quell the reasonable doubt in my mind that Lindsay Clancy is criminally culpable in this case. And that's the standard, isn't it? And so I'm going to fast forward a little bit because this was the most explosive. Well, actually, let me get to the malingering part. That's 624. He's going to talk about malingering and see what he has to say.
Look at that research and see what it suggested and kind of lay it out there in terms of the way she described it. So some research suggests that that one consideration is whether the voices are internal or external, whether they're coming from your own thoughts or whether they're coming from outside of your head. And Ms. Clancy perceived this voice as external, which is more consistent with genuine hallucinations. However, command hallucinations are often, in about 88% of individuals reporting them by one count, accompanied by a related delusion. Ms. Clancy did not report any accompanied delusions. So thus far, you've got 1 point for genuine and 1 point for possible exaggerated. Then there's frequency and control. Genuine psychotic hallucinations are more often intermittent than constant. They'll come and they'll go. You'll hear it, stop hearing it. You'll hear it again, stop hearing it, and this can extend over a period of time. Ms. Clancy, in this instance, reported that the voice was constant for 18 to 20 minutes, and then it stopped. It had not been experienced before, and it has not been experienced since. And she also did not report having any control over the voice or over her actions in response to the voice. Then the next item is content. So genuine hallucinations are often familiar, use both genders, and are clear rather than vague. Ms. Clancy described this voice as clear, but it was unfamiliar and it was a single male voice. So that was sort of mixed. I'm not counting it as one direction or another. And then finally, reaction and coping. Individuals who experience hallucinations like this often try to reduce their influence in different ways. Could be praying, could be listening to music. And while those who inaccurately report the experience of such hallucinations often do not describe coping mechanisms. And Ms. Clancy didn't report any attempt to stop the voice or distract herself from it or what have you. So there were about 3 points on which her account more closely resembled exaggerated or fabricated hallucinations. One where it looked more genuine and one that was kind of mixed.
If I could ask you a question, you said that there were more points indicating malignancy.
I'm going to move up to 634, where we get into the thing that almost caused a mistrial.
If we could go to the next slide, I think if you could describe for us the evidence that you saw for suicide combined with altruistic filicide.
Yeah. Altruistic filicide is a term that's used that means killing your kids out of love, not because you're trying to be cruel or for material gain or because you want them out of your lives or any of that, but killing them out of love so that you could basically, they wouldn't have to suffer, so you could prevent their suffering. And what she did, I thought, was begin with what I said a minute ago was a highly lethal and very serious suicide attempt.
And that was preceded
by months of thoughts and impulses about you should harm yourself, you should kill yourself, your brain is damaged, that sort of thing. And that, I think, is the beginning of the way to understand what happened that day. The second point is that, as I've said before, she didn't like to leave her children. Whether that was for date night or school or going back to work or anything, she did not like to leave her children. And if she had taken her own life, then her children would have been without her, and she thought that they would suffer. And she'd been having these thoughts both about herself and about her children over a several-month period. And the other thing that I will say is that she was in pain. She was suffering. She was doing a little bit better than she had been before she went into McLean, but she was still in pain. She was suffering. I think she was even desperate. And that is something that is often characterizes people who try to take their own life. They're in pain, they're suffering, and they're trying to put a stop to it. And I think when she decided at some point that she was going to put a stop to it, then she had to answer the question of what to do about the kids. And she didn't want to leave them, and she was convinced that they would suffer without her.
For the next slide. And further evidence that you saw for the suicide combined with altruistic filicide?
There was. One of the things that she said when asked about what happened is that in the course of strangling each child, she said, "Go to God, baby, go to God." And that was part of her expectation, that she and the children would be together in heaven with God. She was raised as a Catholic, and this, as I understand, Catholic considerations, that's not necessarily what happens. But when I asked her about that, when I said, "Isn't suicide a mortal sin?"
Yeah, I see counsel over here.
Look at the judge's face. He was pissed. Look at his face. He looks like one of those ghosts on the Haunted Mansion. He's just, he knew what was coming. Like, as he was saying it. Oh, just look at watch his reaction.
That's not necessarily what happens, but when I asked her about that, when I said, "Isn't suicide a mortal sin?"
Yeah, I see counsel over here.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, we're going to end it right there. I'll give you my thoughts and what I think about all of that. Grounds for a mistrial. Yeah, I mean, it's grounds for a mistrial. I don't think that the judge necessarily needed to declare mistrial on the basis of that, because he gave a strong admonition. I'm not going to replay it. Reddington gives an oral motion. It says, "Look, I used restraint in not bringing this motion the first time it happened, but now it's happened twice. And I feel like they're doing it on purpose, and it's pissing me off. And it's very clearly misconduct." And then the prosecution disagreed. And then the judge said, "Look, it is out of pocket and it is inappropriate. I'm not going to declare a mistrial, but I'm going to give everybody a really firm warning to knock that shit off." It's pretty much what he said. And so he didn't declare a mistrial, but what he did say is the jury is not to regard any form of religious testimony in this case. And so this is where I stand on this case. Right now, I really thought over the weekend about the statement, because when I heard it on Thursday night, I was like, I really got to sit with this statement. It was the first time we had heard any reference to what the auditory hallucination had said to Lindsay Clancy. And then her words coming out to the chaplain about what she said. I think my children are safe, or thank God my children are safe. I really had to sit there and consider what it is that she meant by that. There's a lot of theories. Have I definitively settled into a position? No. But what I do know is this. I have enough reasonable doubt that she was in the midst of a psychotic episode where if I was on the jury, I'd probably be leaning towards not guilty, absent some miracle of evidence that comes in on the 11th hour, because tomorrow is supposed to be the last day of evidence. Wednesday is going to be closing arguments. And so I don't know, but there's a lot to consider. What I know is, just objectively looking at the expert testimony, I have heard from 6 different medical experts now, and every single one of them have a different opinion of what was wrong with Lindsay Clancy. Some say she has symptoms of mania. Some say she didn't have any symptoms of mania. Some said she didn't have postpartum. Others said she had postpartum anxiety, depression. One said she had psychosis. One, the most qualified, said she had symptoms of delusion. And what I take from all of that, if there's not a general consensus, then I can't be sure about any of this. And they presented to me so far a coherent case where she might have been in the midst of psychosis on January 24th. I don't know. So if I am an objective juror, I am probably looking at this it seems like every expert witness has been obliterated on cross-examination for the most part. Not necessarily the last witness, Heilbrun, but he hasn't been cross-examined yet, and he ended testimony on something that almost caused a mistrial. And so there's that. And I think that the jurors are paying attention to that. And I think Resnick has been the most credible, authoritative of all the experts so far, and the only one that was able to withstand whatever scrutiny was coming for them on cross-examination. And so on that basis, I would say that I think the defense has an inroads to an acquittal at this point. And we could talk about that tomorrow. Non-criminal responsibility. So we'll see. I could change my mind tomorrow if I hear something dispositive. But for right now, I'm really impressed with Resnick. I'm really frustrated with the lack of cohesion of educational thought when it comes to the experts in this case. And in light of that, if you're telling me that I get reasonable doubt, I have reasonable doubt that the experts know anything about what they're doing, about what was going on with Lindsay Clancy. And so we'll see. We'll see where we're at tomorrow. At any rate, folks, it's late. I know it's late for you all. For some of you guys, it's first thing in the morning for my Australian folks. I wish you all a good night or a good morning, and I will see you guys tomorrow, same time, same place. Good night. Bye-bye.